Cheers. Oh, Scott. All right, guys.
Everybody back quiet.
Yeah, they're all back away from you.
Very obedient tonight. So firstly, guys, thanks so much for coming tonight. My name is Fergal Kenny. I'm the founder and president of Digital Irish. This is our first in-person event in, 18 months? Something like that.
It's your favourite though as well.
It will be at the end of this.
Best one this year.
we've got a live one tonight, right? So if you're unfamiliar with Digital Irish, we've been around about 8 years. We exist to do a couple of things. We promote Irish startups here in the States, and we highlight interesting Irish Americans, Irish expats doing cool things in the digital and entrepreneurial space. Over the course of our history, we've had about 4,000 discrete people at our events. We've highlighted about 200 different Irish startups. We've set up an offshoot angel investing group called Digital Irish Angels. And we still are very active on the podcast side. If you're unfamiliar with the Digital Irish podcast, please subscribe. We've got a couple of new initiatives going on. Gavin over here has set up a new community site for us as well, which when you signed up for this event, you had to be part of, so we're excited about getting that going. We are a 501c7 not-for-profit trade body. We are funded by a couple of different sponsors, but a key sponsor is the Department of Foreign Affairs. So Sean's going to say just a word in a second, just to welcome us here. Yeah, so thanks so much for coming. This is the first event, as I said, in a while. We tend to do events every sort of 6 weeks or so between September and June, so obviously we're getting kicked off a little later this year, but that can be excused. And we're going to start doing things both a combination of online and in person. So I'm going to hand over for you touch around.
It's wonderful to see people back in the consulate. It's been so long. Great to have events again, and this is the first event we've done since the pandemic with an external partner. So Digital Irish is the first, so a first for you and a first for us as well. Digital Irish, you had some amazing events during the pandemic. You were really nimble in how you adapted, I think, and did so many great podcasts and events on Zoom, some of which I was at. But it's no replacement to doing things in person. Digital Irish, we're a big supporter of yours. I think you're really filling a kind of a gap in the market in a way. Working as a hub for innovation, you always have wonderful guests like Aidan, but your most important trait or thing that you bring, I think, to the table is your networking and your convening ability. And that's why I'm delighted you're having the event here again. And we look forward to doing many more. And hopefully when the J1 grads come back online, hopefully next summer, I know that's one of the reasons we're a big supporter of Digital Irish is you've placed so many grads in companies in the US, and we're really appreciative of your work on that. So I'm going to hand the mic back over to Aidan, and just one more time, Kate Milfolcha, welcome to everyone.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much. So, Aidan, I'm going to give you just a quick bio, and I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, but just the high level on Aidan. Aidan has a great backstory. That's why we're titling this The American Dream for a couple of different reasons. But and as a group that prides itself on networking, probably some of the most effective networking ever done by an Irish person in the States. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But Aidan's the founder, CEO, and board, and member of the board of Skout Cybersecurity, which recently sold to Barracuda Networks. Yeah. So now he's got the Barracuda email address. Former founder and CEO of Oxford Global Solutions, which sold to Willis Towers' parents, so 2 successful exits under his belt. And then on the side, you're on the board of Autism Speaks. Yep. And I'm going to Cordaid, right? Is the that's
Cordaid,
yeah. So you can tell us maybe a bit more about that as well.
Yep.
From Laois originally. Yep. So would love to just get started with that, right? Because the story's great. We're going to split this in 2. We're going to do Aidan's backstory, how he got to where he is now, and then we're going to talk a little bit about security and going to scare the hell out of you. Right? So tell us about. I mean, you were born in Laois. Tell us a bit about your upbringing.
Born in Laois, and hands up anyone who's been to Laois. Yeah. Hands up, anyone who's been to Laois twice. Only one. So I mean, I'm a very proud Laois man, very proud Irish person. Blessed with wonderful parents, and I've got 5 brothers, so we had 6 boys in 8 years. So you're a typical Irish family. However, growing up in Ireland, I always felt like there was something bigger, and for me at least. And as I've kind of traced back my steps, my mother told me I just was home in August. She said that when I was 3 years old, I pointed at a picture on the TV of New York and said, I want to go there. So I think something inside me always like, and here I am in New York, which is the city I love. And I think, I came to the US when I was 23, and I had no visa. Could have done with the consulate relationship then. I had no job, and I had about 600 euros at the time coming, or dollars, whatever it was. That it wasn't enough anyway. Whatever I had, and I knew one person, and so I started off. I've got a job cleaning dishes and glasses in a restaurant in Jupiter, Florida. And I thought Jupiter, Florida was America. I didn't realize it's like the epicenter of where all the millionaires live. But it was so, and the reason I bring that up is my parents would have worked 100 times harder than I've ever worked. But I had the good fortune of being in the right place at the right time to meet the right people. And that bounced the ball, and that opportunity led to many great things happening for me. So like working hard is table stakes, but knowing that there's an opportunity in front of you for something great to happen. So I'll thread the story through. I set up a business to get a work visa with a partner in Florida, and I told him I knew a lot about catering and I knew nothing. But I was desperate. I was desperate to stay in the US, and I wanted to be legal. That was really important to me. And so figured that out. That's a longer story for another day. Then I met this amazing entrepreneur. His name is Mike Pascucci. Michael now, today he's probably 86 years old, he's 87 years old today. I met him when he was around 70, and he pioneered the concept of car leasing in the United States. Extraordinary entrepreneur in lots of different industries, in media, owned a golf course in East End of Long Island called Sabonic. And so I came up and I started working with him. I worked on his businesses, his investment businesses and the golf course. And I used to spend Monday through Thursday working with him, and then fly Thursday lunchtime and work the weekends at my other job in Florida. So it was tough. So, working hard again was table stakes. Mm-hmm. Then, kind of quickly, realized that working for him wasn't going to help create any opportunity for me. So I started an insurance business with him, and was very fortunate to meet Steve Ross, who's the owner of the Miami Dolphins, and Related and Equinox and SoulCycle and hundreds and hundreds of companies, and ended up insuring Hudson Yards, which you may know, which is like right here in New York, which was an amazing project, and that company got acquired, and I had my insurance business. A customer had a data breach, and they called me to help them out, because you call a Laois person if you have a data breach. And so I discovered security, and I spent about a couple of years buying beer and burgers for hackers and security people, and then started that company, and that kind of was the right place, right time, and then in July we got acquired in July, and it's been a great journey so far. I'm just beginning, and one of the things I was talking to Fergal about was, never have I ever seen a better time in the history of opportunity that I've seen than right now. There is so much opportunity and the speed of innovation, and I don't think people can even imagine, what the world is going to look like in 5 years right now. And that's great for everyone in this room. We as the Digital Irish, and I think we should be not afraid to lean into that and lead. So that's the Cliff Notes version.
Definitely.
Digress however you want, but
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why insurance, by the way? That seems like a very complex place to start.
To be really honest, it wasn't my idea to go into the insurance business. It was the family's idea, and I was the founder CEO of the company with them. And I wouldn't do anything, to be totally honest with you. I just wanted to try to start something to see could I succeed. And insurance is very competitive. And you know, I think when we did it in a very unique way where we leveraged the infrastructure of other brokerage firms.
Yeah.
And nobody ever thought we were going to ever deliver any a large business, and that turned out to be, it grew like extremely quickly in like, you know, 2 to 3 years. And I just think, you know, everybody needs it, and we had a very unique value proposition where we delivered a lot of other value to those customers when we were with them, and yeah, and I got, you know, to sit a test and get a license and all that other stuff that I barely got, and but I still have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I was listening to your TED talk, I mean, I'm interested, as we are a networking group, I mean, just, you know, your general take on that, and in particular, what, you know, you've been in, you know, you've had a sort of a right-hand seat to a lot of people with a lot of power.
Yeah.
What do you see that they sort of do different, and how do they operate differently to us, apart from having maybe a bigger baseline of cash to start?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, the cash isn't the common denominator at all.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Ross has a great line that I think summarizes the difference between people who get to that scale and people who don't. He says, if you bet small and you win, then you've lost. Right? So it's the ability, and I think, not to generalize, but I've noticed in Ireland there's lots of businesses that become, you know, very good lifestyle businesses, but never that push to go get scale. Yeah. Now the good news is there's more and more examples of extraordinary Irish entrepreneurs who are breaking that mold, which is fantastic. In terms of common traits, you know, I asked, when I moved to the US first, I interviewed 65 people who I thought, well, I was dying, like, how do you be successful? I didn't know. I figured there's some recipe or some like special gene that everybody has. And I was really delighted to find out that all the same answer. They said, well, I just worked harder than everybody else. And then I those same kind of 60 people, only 5 of them had a successful family where there wasn't even a divorce or a problem with their kids. And so that redefined how I looked at what success was going to be for me. Mm-hmm. And I asked all those 5 people, I said, how did you, you know, build such amazing business and still have a great family? And they all had the same answer. And I thought it was going to be some time management thing. No, it was like I married a great person. They unilaterally all said, no, I just like got unbelievably lucky and married a great person. So I think there's a tax that happens to people when they reach massive success levels. And it doesn't necessarily be financial, but it goes somewhere, whether it goes to your health, to your family. And I think we've all learned in COVID what our own personal tax is. Like, if you didn't know beforehand, you certainly know what it is now. So, and I think that's a great blessing for everybody, and it was the great leveler. But in terms of, just to touch on the networking piece for a minute, and the term is kind of hard to grasp. I believe in service. So, if you serve the person that's in front of you, and you genuinely don't want anything for it, they will keep you around regardless of what their walk of life is. When you're a billionaire, there's very few people around them that don't want something.
Yeah, sure.
So I found that to be the common thread. And then they like get invited to stuff, like, you know, and invited back over and over again. And then, you know, when I met Steve Ross for the first time, I asked him so many questions. Because I never thought I'd get to meet him again. Like, what's it like to own an NFL football team? Which isn't cool. All the things you'd like love to ask. And I have a habit of making sure that whenever I get a chance to ask in front of somebody, like ask those questions, like I may never see them again, and but not look for anything in return, if that makes sense. Just the questions.
Sure.
So that's been a common thread, and they're, you know, most of them don't, you know, are really wonderful human beings and generous, and like, that's been my experience. And I think they struggle a little bit with, you know, everything that goes with being uber successful, like very complicated. You know, your life gets complicated in ways you mightn't imagine. Physical security, and like when you start to see what they deal with, it's not fun. It's not fun, but and also they've sacrificed a lot to get there. And so I think, you know, humanity is like taking a shift at the moment in a post-COVID world where, you know, I think everybody's realigned around what's the purpose in your work. So, and I think there's a we're a big transition now that's happening that is going to kind of realign. And that's why it's so hard for people to employ staff at the moment. You're in that business.
Sure.
We were talking about that the last time we chatted, because the next generation want to be connected to purpose in the work. So I think it's going to be less about like what does success look like and how do I become XYZ wealthy, and it's more about do I have really purpose in my work? Because frankly, if you're born in the last 25, 30 years in the US, you have more than you could ever need. So like, it's hard to, like I don't know where my kids are growing up, but it's amazing here in general, so.
Well, you commented that,
I know I'm going all over the place, but
No,
that's how it is. So it's like,
you said safety is a big driver, right?
Yeah.
And for what you do now, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested just like, also on how you got into the security space. Obviously it's coupled with insurance, but why that space? And
So,
maybe you can tell us a little bit
this is
more.
total anecdotal evidence. I don't have data to support this, but when I talk to my staff and you get to know people on your team, there was a huge percentage of people who were bullied that work in security now. So that blew my mind, but it made total sense, right? Like, of course, they want to protect people. So I think I have had challenges in my life where, growing up and in some very difficult circumstances. Like I had an issue one time where I was in the Congo. It's a whole long story for another day. Held up at gunpoint, and I think things got triggered in me where I really felt strongly about protecting people from that moment on. And so when I could get up every day, leave my kids, leave my family, and go work on something, I can tell them I'm going to go work to protect people online. That really gets me going. Like that gets me excited, and that gets other people excited to come work with you. And there's there's so many ridiculous business things I've heard where you need to hire great people, which I think is not true. You need to hire great people before you can afford them. Because if you just hire great people, you can just spend and get them to come work for you. But the hard part is getting them to come work for you before you can afford to pay them.
Sure.
And that's why I think purpose and work and vision and energy are critical for the future of this generation to make a difference. And on the safety side, I think there's a handful of categories that deliver non-profit-like benefit in a for-profit. I'm a commercial person, but I get all this non-profit benefit. So to me, around when you're doing your work, you got that too because you give people employment. It's jobs, it could be their families.
Sure, career advice is a big
exactly.
one, right? I mean, especially guiding them on their overall career rather than just looking at the next job. It's like how it impacts upon their life. So tell me a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of Skout. Maybe just explain to people how you went to market. Just what.
Yeah. So it's funny when I go to the security conferences, even from the beginning. I was in a room one time there was 20 founders of cyber companies, and I was the only non-technical founder. So it was 19 other people, and I was the only one. So I have always had a kind of an odd outside-in look at security, but I was very focused on how the customers felt. So an interesting thing, that pattern I've seen is people freak out about insecurity. We've dealt with incidents over the years, but there's a common, they get angry first, then afraid, then they'll tell you what their real issue is, what they're really worried about, followed by relief.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a pattern everybody goes through. So what we did at Skout was we created a platform to make sure small businesses felt safe. And we deliver that we only sell through third-party IT firms, so these managed service providers. So we kind of customized everything for them. Because I thought at the beginning that JP Morgan would be able to afford to spend a lot, but what about these small businesses? It's, earning a living, and if we could crack that code, it's very, very hard to do. It's very hard to make something very good in an affordable way that's easy to consume at a price that's why not.
Mm-hmm.
So to get all those things to line up was really difficult, and if we were able to do that, it would deliver a lot of value and create enterprise value.
And practically speaking, the platform covers the bases, right?
Yeah, so we basically built, it's like a wholesale business. We built a platform that IT people can become security companies. So we give them a software platform, it's all self-service, even sales and marketing support's all self-service, and they deliver that out, they become a cyber company literally overnight. We've had we've had people who started companies just using our platform.
Yeah.
And you know, the vision for the business was always how do we make cyber accessible to everyone, but the mission was to be the #1 provider to these MSPs because that's how we could protect the most amount of jobs. So, and getting your vision, mission, and strategy all lined up is very difficult to do, but once you do, it's pretty magic when the team kind of gets oriented around it, you know.
And did you have to sort of dampen down your own sort of end branding, or like was that important, or how did
Yeah,
you
well, you do it like wholesale the whole way through, right? So it's all powered by Skout. So frankly, if you're a business and your IT guy or girl comes into you and says, you know, I'm going to do security for you now, you're like, no, you're not. You're like fixing the desktop. So the knowing that they had a great partner that had great credentials with a great platform, so people wanted to know who was behind it. You know, they do a lot of diligence on it. So we were very fortunate that we have great investors and partners and, you know, people, and it all worked out.
So speaking about working out, right? I mean, there's always a mystique. I mean, obviously you get the biggest attaboy for having an exit in this space, right? But interested to know how that goes down, because you know you sort of hear. I mean, you always hear of these overnight successes, but really it's taken them years to get to this point. But how do they? You've seen a couple of exits.
I had the worst CEO that I know. I mean, I don't think. I think I became a founder because I couldn't really get another job. So it wasn't like I was, I'm going to CEO. I was like, I was desperate just to get a job and do well. So it wasn't like I had this great vision. I did focus on a kind of handful of problems, but I'm going to get to the exit in a second. It's like the whole thing's a disaster until it's over. So particularly when you're the leader, because all hard problems land on your desk. If it was an easy problem to solve, it would have been solved already and somebody doing a high five. So I think being a founder CEO has been different than a CEO. I was with this brilliant guy today, and we're looking at investing in different things, and we're kind of having this discussion, and we're talking about CEOs, and I was like, no, I really don't. I think if you talk to my team, they would tell you I'm not very good at it either, but there's a handful of things I think I'm really good at. And when we get into the exit scenario, that was probably one of the areas. So I think, you know, our market, you know, picked a great sector, so I knew the market is in a really good space. We had a lot of investment interest, so I was talking to a partner or two in private equity to help us grow and go to that next level. This company reached out. I'll tell you what happened. I mean, this company reached out and they wanted to meet, and I gave them a date 2 weeks from now, and they said, "No, I want to talk tomorrow." So I got on the call. There's like 8 people, and it was all over Zoom. So I actually never met anyone in person until it was all over. And then I met with their CEO, and you know, it was a strategic fit for their business. So I think what people miss a lot is lining up a customer problem and solving that first, but then understanding where that sits in a strategic ecosystem is, you know, important. Not from day one, but you always kind of want to have an eye on the things that they care about. And there's a time, particularly in technology, because it moves so quickly, when it's just your time. And you know, we built it's called an XDR platform that it's very relevant right now, relevant for the future, and that kind of made the conversation easy. And then I learned that, you know, you need to fight hard for your team. So like there's the investors are going to do well because they invested. It's pretty, you know, baked beforehand. But so that was probably the most satisfying part of it. The team doing really well, and that actually has a great knock-on effect because they're, you know, you see kind of how their lives change and even their attitudes to work. The third thing that I'll mention, I think COVID was like 5 years, so like worth of work on people, and I think I'm seeing it now where people are only now getting, like, you're all out here probably for your first or second event. You haven't been at 10 events in the last 5 weeks, right? So I think people are only trying to understand now, well, how do I really feel? How do I operate? So in security, what happened to us when COVID hit was the problem got so bad so quick. We had a good line of sight that this was going to get pretty rough here in the next 12 or 18 months because security had an acute problem, very similar to how the pandemic was acute in the beginning. So that was probably another catalyst for me saying, all right, I think now is the right time. And those things lined up, and they're very nice people. You know, they're owned by, Barracuda Networks is the name of the company that acquired us, and they're owned by Tomo Bravo, which is a big investment firm that do a lot in this space. And and I learned a lot. Yeah.
And you weren't able to read their faces in the room like on Zoom, which is
well, you know, it's. I got great advice. I think so. I have like all sorts of like. One thing I want to make sure I mention today. I started working with a therapist 2.5 years ago, and if I didn't have a therapist and I wasn't focused on my mental health, I wouldn't have got the deal done. Period. So there's not enough conversation about that. So that's why I want to like lead with that one out front. Then I have an executive coach who's phenomenal, and he gave me great advice. He said, write down on a list 1, 2, or 3 things that you really care about before you start any process with a deal. Because he said once you get into the deal, those things will get compromised when things get emotional. It was brilliant advice. So all I did with things that hard, I said, read the list a little. Number 1 I want, number 2 I want, and I would just keep reading it over and over again. And people started like complaining because they're really important things, obviously. And it was like, you know, what's the valuation and how we look, and there's a handful of things. So
got it.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's great backstory, and like as I said, a true American dream story, right? So I want to just cut to sort of more talking about the security space.
Sure.
If that's cool with you.
Yep.
And I want to just like get your take on. You've obviously seen firsthand with these small to medium businesses what they're dealing with. I mean, what are the actual threats that they're facing right this second? We'll talk about ransomware in a minute, right?
Yep.
But because that's getting all the buzz. But what practically are you seeing?
Let's talk about the landscape first. That sets the stage for why these problems are happening. So there is globally 4 million job openings in security. So if you think about if we had the pandemic and we had 4 million job openings in healthcare, it would have been pretty ugly. It was already really bad when you have a hard problem. So that kind of sets the landscape for having a lot of the challenges that we have today. And then if you're defending against a cyber attack, you have to be right 100% of the time. If you're attacking, you only have to be right once. So it's really a lopsided equation, right? That's why automation is really, really important. Most companies, 99% of companies, just don't do the basic hygiene. So there's lots of parallels to the pandemic. You gotta wash your hands, you gotta wear a mask, you gotta use hand sanitizer. For security, you gotta have great email protection, you gotta have great endpoint protection as a small business. If you got those 2 things, you're a long way there. You know, and then there's no 911 for cyber. So like if you have a healthcare problem, you got 911, the ambulance shows up. If anyone in here had a cyber problem in their business, I guarantee you don't have a 911 number. So I don't think that plane is quite landed yet on businesses, and it's only beginning and starting. So that context in the landscape is really important to understand kind of the situation in the future. So why like we can put people going to space, why can't we stop hackers going in?
Sure.
So the threat surface is another big factor. So as you have more mobile adoption, more people working from home, they're not sitting in a tiny little network. It's very, very, very good, and you're using machines that are personal, and all those things kind of add and make it more difficult. But really the basics, if you get the basics right, you've got a great foundation for a good security program. And it's different by sectors, lots of other things, but that to me gets missed a lot, right? So you apply CIA to the things you care about. So if you've got data and systems that you really care about, it's the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data and systems. So, just to give you a quick story, we were talking earlier about how nobody thinks like a bad person. We've had situations where physical security and cyber are now colliding. So we had I can't get too much detail, but a spouse of an IT person that got kidnapped to get admin credentials to get access. So you have cyber and physical coming together. We work with the FBI and all this other stuff. So
sure.
No one in here is a bad person. I hope not, but no one in here is a bad person. So your mind can't even think about what's possible.
Sure.
But bad people,
Well, that was the 80s in Ireland. It was tiger kidnapping.
There you go, right? So I think from a land, so it's pretty. Tools is the other piece I'll touch on. So if you're a nation state like Russia or China everyone here, is connection starters. You all know what a combine harvester is, right? So if you go on top of a combine harvester, it's a big machine that can do a lot of damage, but there's only one or two levers and a couple of buttons: green, go, red, stop. Cyber tools are the very same. Really big, do a lot of damage, but they're really easy to operate. So you don't need to be a skilled operator to do a lot of damage. So a lot of the nation state tools from Russia and China, they get cycled pretty quickly because there's a signature that they leave behind and they're not useful anymore. A college student can buy it for $50, buy the tool, operate it like they're some sophisticated hacker and they're not, and do unbelievable damage. So if you think about the shortage of talent, then you think about how easy it is to operate the tools. So like anyone in here can go online and figure that stuff out. There's better service on the dark web than there is on the clear web.
So let's just segue to, I suppose, the individual as well, because obviously companies are made up of individuals, and we're just talking about how lacks standards and inconsistency. But tell us about like as individuals, what can we do to better protect ourselves? What should we be worried about? Yeah,
so there's 3 ways you can have a problem, both as an individual and a company. So one is identity, right? So your email and your password, right? But if you think about it, most of you in here are probably on LinkedIn. If LinkedIn have a breach and the password is Digital Irish 2020 or whatever it is, 9 times out of 10, that's used on your corporate environment as well. You might have 2-factor, but that is how people start to do the reconnaissance process and learn. It's really, really, like we should have brought a laptop and shown some stuff. It would have been cool. So you'd be stunned at how easy it is and how quick it is to kind of have an identity problem. The reason that's important both personally and for work is that line now is like the individual gets targeted regardless of where they work, and their work can have exposure based on whether an individual is on Instagram or on Facebook, and all those things are available for people to build that profile. Sure. So that line is really kind of meshed now. What you can do is, let's just start with the thing you all probably care about most, is your cache. I was telling Fergal this earlier. Get a separate laptop, get a separate email, and just use that email for banking. That's the first thing. The second thing then is freeze your credit if you're living in the US, because you're not using it all the time and it stops someone else from doing it. And the third thing is have great endpoint protection on your machines. So like pay for something really great on your machine. Those 2 things. The segmentation of your banking is big. Everybody in here is probably going to have a problem with their identity at some point in the next few years if you haven't already. So you have to work off the premise that you have a problem. Now what do you need?
Right.
Yeah.
So moving to like the real macro picture for a second, what about the nation state stuff? Like does it, obviously you can talk about mental health, you can go in a constant state of worry of where this goes, but you've obviously got state players like Russia and others like doing some serious damage. But do you see this over time, like in our lifetime, escalating to physical conflicts on the back of?
Yeah, I think it's closer than you think. Well, let's link in with climate change into that too. Why don't we pile right on? If you look at what's happening with climate, most people are viewing that as a separate environmental issue. When we have challenges with climate and our infrastructure has problems, that's when cyber as a tool for destruction will do the most damage. So if there's floods and fires and infrastructure kind of challenges in the US, that's when you're going to see Russia and China start to do damage from a cyber perspective. So it's a tool that gets used. So there's cybersecurity, that's commercial, and there's cyber warfare. It's a whole different kind of proposition. Yeah. The US is very strong in cyber warfare. So both on the offensive side, the defensive side, and the big challenge that the United States faces is that the critical infrastructure sits in the private sector. So all the critical infrastructure that we rely on is not a government owned, it's private sector owned. So it's super complicated to defend against it. And a lot of it's on legacy systems. So we're going to see more, and it's happening. It's just not reported. It's happening like constantly, like all the time. Like we have, threat. We could literally show you this stuff. It's like happen all the time. China is kind of spray and pray. Like it's we can see the volume of attacks from China drop because they're all state-paid workers. So when they get into work in the morning, the attacks go up. When they go home, it like stops. So yeah, it's that binary. In Russia, very different. It's like low, slow, really long-term, really involved. You saw how that played out the election. But very, very, very long-term, very smart, very capable. Ukraine, Iran, they're like that's like the probably top 4 most problematic countries from the US is attacked more than any other country by a huge multiple. So there's tremendous capability in the US government side as well.
Yeah, I was listening to a pretty scary podcast. It was just talking about war games, and it was when you add artificial intelligence and automated actions on top of it, things can escalate pretty crazily.
Yeah, right? Pretty quickly. Yeah.
So we just touch on ransomware for a second. So that's getting a lot of noise at the moment, and I think most people sort of see this as abstract, that it's big companies getting hit, and it's probably, I think the figure for last year was 350 million, but obviously that's the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there's a lot more ransoms being paid, right?
Yeah. I mean, so if you do software as a service, you do cyber as a service like we do, ransomware, just think of ransomware as a service. So it's a business, and that's how it operates. It's like, it's all done in an automated fashion. It's like they're trying to get prospects and bring them in, lock them up, get the money, move on to the next one. So I think, again, the surprising thing always is, to me, is that it's not hard to fix or defend it, but the hygiene has to get done the right way. I think what you're going to start to see over time, like the bar has been very, very low for attackers. They don't have to do, they say there's a sophisticated cyber attack. It's highly unlikely it was sophisticated. They don't have to work that hard. So they don't have to do things that are very sophisticated to get in. This is more how it's described when you fucked up. Sorry, will I curse anyway? But everyone's sure, of course. Now everyone's comfortable. So, but going back to that, I think on the side of the customer side, it's a rough call, right? So we get these calls. Someone says, I've got my business managed service provider supporting 100 small businesses. Sitting with ransomware right now, 100 companies are shut off right now, and they have no access to their systems. Their employees can't do anything, and there's millions and millions and millions of dollars problems right now. So the argument is you should never pay the ransom because you're dealing with criminals and there's no guarantees on anything. But secondly, the vast majority of people, don't have a choice but to pay if they want to try and have some shot, because they didn't have the telemetry or systems in place that even if you wanted to fix it, you couldn't, because you can restore from backup.
Yeah, backups as well.
And backups are getting hit now as well at the same time. But so it's kind of like it, but still, it just comes back to email and endpoint protection. You got those two things in, you're a long way there. So I don't, I think the security community can do a much better job, communicating really clearly to people around what they're supposed to do. Not that, it's dark and scary, it's ransomware, what are you supposed to do? The recommendations are actually pretty straightforward. Most people will leave here tonight and not do the things we talked about. That's been my experience. But yet they'll call Fergal in a month and say, do you remember that? Do you have his number? That's way more likely. 90% of the people will move in the second bucket.
So let's just move on to sort of to predictions, right? Because I'm going to tie it in as well, right? In your TED talk at Fairfield University, you talked about how we're going to need to fundamentally sort of change the structure of the internet, right? And one of the biggest flaws is, Facebook with Cambridge Analytica, or any of these credit bureaus getting hit or hacked. Massive centralized repositories of data without really our approval, right?
Yeah.
Why should we have to freeze our data? So, what's going to solve that? Is blockchain going to solve that?
Well, okay. So we'll peel that back a little bit. So, I think of it like credit. So, if you're a bank and you've got A credit, B credit, C credit, if you're thinking of privacy and identity along those same thresholds, you'll have some people I don't want any digital footprint. I don't want any social media. I don't want my information out with anybody, etc., etc. There's very low tolerance for exposure. There, in my opinion, there'll be an internet for those people. Set up a certain way, the way you can access. That's why they have. I think that's kind of coming. On the other end of the spectrum, just to kind of highlight the gaps, you will have people that will exclusively use their identity to be monetized, where they will allow advertisers to pay them to let it go and let that out. And then you have everybody in between. And then you'll have people selectively say, oh, I really care about my identity, but I go crazy on social. So there's, and no judgment, I'm just saying you'll have a range of people. So that's going to dictate what needs to happen on the internet over time, because its architecture is fundamentally set up to be open, not closed. So there's tremendous opportunity and applications for blockchain over time. Use cases are being developed, but user behavior is the problem, not the architecture. So, like, if you think of your house, why do houses still get robbed when there's plenty of alarms? You don't turn on the alarm. So, the user behavior is a big challenge. That's why this sector is just going to go for so long. It's the same point about people here tonight having the answers to the test, but they won't read them. Is why like the architecture of the internet or how we kind of set it up to be safe is not the problem. The problem is that users will default to, like, we've all been there, right? Like, password, they would throw it out, you write it down or stick it out. I mean, that's just how it is. So I think it'll improve. Security getting embedded into software by design is the next iteration that has to happen, because SaaS applications are becoming a bigger problem than the internet, because everybody's living in SaaS applications today. Everyone here is essentially got a digital bank, whether you know it or not. And, your Gmail has tons of stuff in it, and that's where all your data sits. So, so I think there's going to be some pretty significant regulation coming as well. That's going to dictate, what can happen. So those central repositories, like there's worse. That's why Facebook, is going to have a lot of challenges as it deals with government coming down.
What did you think of all that over the last couple of years?
I mean, what I thought was, I think he's, a crazy man. It's not that they have a problem. That's okay. You got to react as a leader in that situation. He has a lot of power right now, and how he behaved is inappropriate given his responsibility. Period. Right. So that's my opinion on it. And I think he's got some rocky roads ahead, because his default setting is like not okay because of the responsibility that he has right now globally. Like, and forget us living in the US. Like, think of the problems that's going to create if you're a small business in Ghana, and everything's done through social, and you're trying to generate revenue online, or your payment system that gets leads through these online systems, or you're an e-commerce business on Instagram, or WhatsApp's used so many places for teams to function. So that's the modern setup of a digital business. So you don't get to say that everybody else is wrong when you've got that responsibility.
Yeah.
And so he'll pay a price for that.
Right. And just for yourself,
I got fired up with that. God, I didn't realize I cared so much.
So, what about what's next for you? I mean, where do you see the gold in the hills? I mean,
so I'm currently a Barracuda employee, which is awesome, and I've never been an employee before. I'm like the worst employee. Really enjoyed. They're super nice people, so I'm going to help them. Right now, I'm doing a lot of investing in things that I think are really exciting. So I invest a lot in security. So I'm just leaning in to learn more about crypto and doing some stuff with NFTs. I don't know anything about that, but my partner knows a lot about it. Mm-hmm. I'm invested in one of the fastest growing companies in history called Thrasio, which is an e-commerce business.
We talked about that.
Yeah, like Kin. I'm doing I think with climate change, there's this company called Kin, which is going public in December, that I invested in, that does really modern insurtech for homes, and they work in the most difficult states, like they're starting in Florida, and the technology is like really extraordinary. The company's growing like 300% something year over year, an extraordinary team. So that's been fun, and my kids are the biggest challenge, and in a good way. And I do a lot, nonprofit stuff. Then is
Tell us about Cordaid as well.
yeah, Cordaid. So my friend Mike, Hoffman, Mick is here, by the way. My good friend Mick is the co-founder of Global Citizen. So I don't know if you saw the concert in the park, all the noise he made the other day. And Mick does some extraordinary work for people really in need all over the world. But we have a very good friend in common, Mike Hoffman, who has helped me with all things nonprofit. Cordaid was a Dutch-based NGO, and they basically do work in the 15 most problematic, worst countries in the world. So when everything was going on in Myanmar, they were first on the ground. We did a project in Afghanistan, which is around job creation, so people wouldn't join Al Qaeda. And we did stuff in Haiti around the world, really amazing organizations. So I helped them build out their team here, and we did a bunch of work with the Bush Foundation and Linda Gates and Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation. So that was awesome. And then I joined the board of Autism Speaks, because my son was diagnosed with autism, and we just announced a new CEO today, Keith Wargo, who's incredible. He's a parent, and I think he's going to do amazing. And so I spent a lot of time on that too. And that's complicated, like a whole other complicated problem to even understand. That's why they call it a spectrum. And I was just talking to Rory there earlier. I'm working on a couple of ideas for myself that's coming next. I'm pretty sure I know what I'm going to do next long term. But I'm trying to figure out the right way to give back to Irish entrepreneurs in a scalable way. I'd like to figure out how we can unlock the ambition of Irish people earlier in their life cycle. So whether that's
less lifestyle businesses.
Well, less even about the lifestyle. It's more about like the imagination that anything's possible, even if you're in Offaly or if you're in Laois or you're in Roscommon or whatever county you want to mention. So, like, I wish, like, if someone had came to my secondary school, which is no longer in existence, and told me all the things that were possible, I would have taken a very different path. Like, I'm glad it worked out, but it was hard. Like, there's probably easier ways. So, like, I'm hounding my brothers, like, to send their kids to college in the US. I said, even if they go back just so they can see what it's like, just so they can see, like, for the experience. So I think, I track, like, the young scientists, because the girl I went to school with won the Young Scientist Award years ago. And so I track and see what the Collisons have done. And, like, for young people in Ireland, it'd be great if they could know that they can go on to become anything they want to be. Unless you have someone that can give you the dots, it's very hard to connect them.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and lay out those dots, like from right here, how you get to whatever it is you want, and how to do that. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Cool. Well, that's also our mission as well. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that as well. So that's it in terms of questions. I mean, I think very few people, like, when you've done what you've done, actually give you a bit of a round of applause to say congratulations for your story. I mean, that's an awesome story. So maybe thanks so much for sharing with us. That was awesome. We're going to have, I think we're just going to do a couple of questions. So if anyone's got a question.
I have a quick question for you, and it comes back to entrepreneurship. And it struck me when you were talking earlier in your conversation about setting up a company and the single focus on you and the market you're in.
Yeah.
And it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
So for young entrepreneurs, the idea of how to get peripheral market penetration, who can they work with? Where can they set up the building blocks to actually have a market presence bigger than what they can physically do with their vision?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on, like, industry's big. So, like, if you're in a SaaS business, it's one thing. If you're in a manufacturing business, it's different. But, your customers' pain will guide where you go next typically, in my experience. And if you spend time with customers saying, all right, this was phase one, what are the next 3 things that you think you're struggling with currently? That's generally that's how we do all of our roadmap for any business we have. It's all customer driven. So it's not somebody saying, hey, this is what I think the next problem is. That's once you start. I don't mean vision for a world when your company's completed. I mean in terms of taking it from the problem around, how you iterate on that has been my experience. And most people, if you execute really well, you got to stay that heads down, that next iteration finds you before you have to look for it usually. You know, that's been our experience.
Anyone else?
Oh, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, mine's pretty rudimentary. It was, you said there were 2 things that someone's going to ask in the future about what you said tonight to do in order to protect yourself. It was email, something or other. What were those 2 things?
Endpoint protection. I like that you have a notebook. So now we found the one person who's going to do it.
Definitely.
Everyone else is like, I don't even remember the question.
Endpoint protection. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, Kehoe@barracuda.com if you're stuck.
Oh, yeah.
If you're stuck. Yeah.
Love it. Thank
So,
you.
I've got a serious question. My first question is, are any of your passwords Gaelic words?
No.
Okay.
No.
I wanted to ask about communications. You tapped into something about we should have all our banking on a separate computer.
Yeah.
I discovered traveling, if you buy your ticket via points, and those points are attached to a bank, it can be a problem. And because your itinerary is actually only if you get into your bank account. And I did it at a club in Ireland at the airport. You know, paid to go into the club and sit there. Mm-hmm. And when on my way home, someone not only bought the latest whatever iPhone came out at that point, but the next day there was $10,000 worth of charges for something called the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden. Yeah. The breach came entirely from that moment that was on the public Wi-Fi to hit the bank, and only for the reason of checking those points for the itinerary to come home. Now, what do you do when you're in Europe?
Well, let's solve the problem, and we'll get to Europe in a second. So, if you have a bank account, you keep your money in, right? And let's assume there's $1,000 in there, and that's all your money. You create a second bank account, you put 900 in there, and you have no debit card associated with it, no checking account associated with it, no card associated with it. And you fund the account for the maximum amount you'd be comfortable to lose. Once you have a debit card in use, and I'm talking debit first, then we'll go to credit in a second. Once you have a debit card in use anywhere, it's pretty much only a matter of time that you're going to have a problem on debit. If you have a credit card and you don't use debit at all, you know, you can have lots of problems with your credit card. The credit card company is obligated to refund you. If you lose cash in the account, that cash is typically gone. Bank will do an investigation, but like just to like put a finer point on it, like banks are losing money every day and they don't know where it is. So you know, the most recent bank that was set up, that's because think about it, your Bank of America's have done 9 million acquisitions, right? So all those legacy systems. Goldman's bank Marcus.com is one of the more recently built, you know, security embedded in it. It's a digital only bank. So like that infrastructure is probably a lot better. So that's kind of, you know, what you do when you go to Europe is you just use credit card, and everything goes back to like segregation of duties. Think of like anything in security, right? So if you keep your money away in an account and only you can access it, it should be difficult to access for you, and then you will be fine no matter what happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And a VPN, right, on a public Wi-Fi?
Well, you know, the reality is it goes back to people's behavior. When you got your like Delta app or whatever, you know, you have just this once. I'm just going to use the Wi-Fi here. Surely just that's when you have a problem. So you have to get past, like, prevention's possible, but generally speaking, people's behavior dictates that prevention is going to be missed. So what do you do when you have a problem? So I'd rather set it then you know, hopefully somewhere along the line you get saved. Go ahead.
What was your take on the recent data breach of the HSE? Ireland, like, did they get their races and never know that kind of stuff?
Well, that was really sad, you know, to begin with. You got pregnant women going in there trying to have children, you got people trying to get treatment and outpatient, so that's the first thing. I think if you don't invest, you're going to have a problem. So it's no surprise. I have a very long answer for this because there's certain responsibility that sits on the government that they need to step up, in my opinion. Rory's here. I had a conversation with Rory years ago about, like, Ireland is now digital capital of the world. Got Google, Facebook, all these incredible companies domiciled there. Like, there is no reason why Ireland should not be the cybersecurity capital of the world right alongside it. Like, it makes no sense that they're not, given the talent that sits there. You got more leadership than sits in Silicon Valley that sits in Dublin right now. So, but, yet we have, like, our healthcare system, like, crumbling and falling on its knees. So you need vision and a commitment to it the same way Ireland did an incredible job committing to want to bring these companies in. Now we need to make the same commitment to give them all the reasons why they should stay. So, and I think Ireland can become like a digital haven. It should be a strategy, and security needs to really be embedded in that. The government's going to have a lot more problems in security very soon. So
I think we'll call it there. So thank you, Aidan.
You all feel good?
We're just going to have just two little sidebars here for a second. Speaking of schools and inspiring kids to do stuff, Rory here is from Donegal, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what Junk Couture is up to. So,
brilliant.
Go.
Sit down there.
Yeah. And he's got an ask at the end, guys. So if you can help him out, please do
I
so.
don't have a big ask, but I'll be a wee bit of an ask. So, lovely to meet you all. I'm Rory. I am the SVP of Partnerships for Junk Couture, and I'm the country manager for Junk Couture. If you've not heard of it before, it's a creative platform for young people. Set up in Ireland 11 years ago, and we've built this community of 350,000 people now that have taken part, or either as a creator, as an educator, or as a fan of the program. Basically, it revolves around two key elements, one being creativity, the other being sustainability. So what we challenge kids to do is basically create high-end couture fashion from recycled materials. 100% recycled materials across the board. What we do then is give them a platform to show their entrepreneurial sides by marketing it, by showing their school communities how they can collect their materials, because we have everything from plastic bags to fruit peel. We have everything. In the past 11 years, like, if you think of a material, chances are it's come through Junk Couture by a 15-year-old. We have so many stories that have come through this program. And now we're at a very, very critical point where we've just launched in 5 new countries for the first time. COVID came, we had 4 staff at the start of COVID, we've grown to 25 since then. We've started to build our markets elsewhere. We've signed up 120 schools in New York. We've signed up about 110, I think, in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So we're seeing that the appetite's there for it, because it hits so many key aspects for schools. It hits, obviously, it's the sustainability side, obviously, it's the creativity side, but then it also hits the community side. Thanks very much. I think that the community side is a big thing for us, because what we recognise with Junk Couture is that from 13 to 18, it's a very, very critical point for young people. That's where they find themselves, it's where they want to channel what they're doing, what they want to pursue, and sometimes they don't get to make those decisions for themselves. So what we want to do with Junk Couture is basically provide every single aspect that, say, taking part in sport could do for sports people. You learn your social capital, you learn your confidence building, your team building, your leadership skills, everything else. Sometimes creative kids fall by the wayside with that, and they end up, sitting 2 years in going, shit, what do I want to do whenever I go to university? We want to really bridge that gap, and we want to make Junk Couture the sport for creatives. We are in the middle of a seed funding round as well. We just launched, as I said, in 5 new countries. We have a further 6 planned for next year. happy to talk to anybody about the programme. It all culminates in a big live show, a big live spectacle, and this year in September 2022, we will be doing our first ever international final, where we'll be bringing kids from Ireland, from the UK, from Italy, from France, from the US and from the UAE to a big massive spectacle, a big celebration of youth creativity, sustainability, and more importantly the talents that these young people have. So lovely to talk to you.
Tell us what your ask is, what do you need in the States?
So basically I'm here on my own building this business at the minute. I'm being supported by Ireland, but two things. I'm looking for networking. I'm looking for people that may be able to open the doors for me, get me in front of people just to talk. I think one of the things that comes through with Junk Couture is every single person employed by Junk Couture believes in it and has that real passion for it. And I think that passion is, it's embodied by the kids that take part. We just finished, I was saying to Fergal earlier, we just finished our second RT broadcast there at the weekend. It's going to be going out in the Christmas schedule. That's something we're planning for everywhere. We're planning media for everywhere. We're planning sold out shows everywhere. And so far we've got that. So far people have been really buying into it. And I think that's something that, for myself anyway, in New York, it's been so encouraging seeing the best city in the world take to this program straight away.
But practically speaking, it's introductions to schools, sponsors,
It's
TV license deals, that type of thing.
Schools, sponsors, there's licensing, there's media, there's everything. We just partnered with Climate Week NYC, which was 2 weeks ago. Did an amazing job there, and we had a team over about 3 people. But it's the thing about Junk Couture, and it's all well and good me telling you all about it. It's whenever you see it and you see the designs and you see what coffee pods can be turned into, or you see what bicycle tubing can be turned into. It's incredible, and it's all by kids. It's all by kids that are finding their space and they're finding, what they want to do, as opposed to what they're being told to do. And I think that for this to grow, I think I'm going to end up leaning on people like yourselves. If you'll have me, I'm happy to talk to any of you about it. I'm happy to make any introductions as well. So.
Great. Okay. Nice work.
Thanks so much.
Brian, I'm just going to get you to just give us Brian's with Video Elephant. Video Elephant's actually Digital Irish Angels invested in Video Elephant, so full disclosure, I'm one of those, right? But give us an update on the changed go-to-market plan. What's the latest?
Yeah, so I started coming into New York about almost 7 years ago to the day. I actually met Fergal on my first trip to New York, and the support from Digital Irish and Enterprise Ireland and the wider Irish network have been absolutely incredible for us. We're kind of like Getty Images for video. So we have this enormous library of professionally produced video content coming in from big brands that you know, like Bloomberg, Fox, Reuters, Al Jazeera, Euronews, blah, blah, blah. So we've about 3 million videos. We get about 2,000 videos a day from about 1,000 sources. We take it in, standardize it, ingest it, and then we make this library of content available to publishers, media companies, etc. to license. So here in the US, customers would be like Hearst and New York Post and USA Today and many, many, many others. So you're on their websites or their apps, there's a video embedded into an article, there's a good chance it came from us, or at least we're one of their main sources. It's all individual clips, and what happened over the last number of years was, I suppose as technologies improved, cloud computing, 5G, etc., more and more companies were coming to us looking to license content, but saying, look, giving me access to a library of 3 million videos, I don't even know what to do with that. So I have 1,000 screens in gyms, or we've screens in doctors' waiting rooms. Could you give me something a bit more programmed? So we started to program our content into kind of channels or feeds. And so that's been phenomenal for us in now that we're powering a lot of digital signage companies, digital out of home. And then the next logical step from that was streaming. Obviously, COVID was kind to our business, and once a lot of us are back in Ireland, we couldn't travel. We did go and launch our own direct-to-consumer product, Video Elephant TV. So essentially, we were taking all these feeds and channels and licensing them out to people, and we said, well, if we're going to bother doing that, we might as well, push them out to our own end distribution point. So we have a product called Video Elephant TV. And now what's happening is people are coming to us, big platforms are coming to us saying, wow, you have 150 channels on your app and in your platform. can I license 10 of them or 20 of them to put into mine? So we're now starting to do deals with companies like Local Now, and the TV manufacturers are coming to us and so on. And I didn't know I was going to be doing this, so I only started talking to Fergal earlier, but I don't particularly have an ask. But the one thing we're interested in doing is our business has always been around media, so digital publishing, broadcast, etc. I'm particularly interested in breaking into new areas outside of media. So in theory, any corporate website could and should have video in there. It could be a corporate intranet. We can do that for them. Like in fact, we're so keen to break into that area. You know, we can take their own content, package it up with relevant content for their industry or sector or whatever, and give it back to them as a channel that put on their intranet. So their employees would be interested in maybe not just watching the CEO give the quarterly update, but there's some other kind of relevant content about what they're doing. I'm sure there's loads of stuff about cyber. Yeah, so if anyone is like, and it's an area we're really, really keen to break into. So if anyone said, yeah, I think we could help you with that, or I could open a few doors, I'd love to do that. But otherwise, get out your phones, download videoalpha.tv and head through the traffic.
Perfect. All right, great. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
That's it, guys. We'll see you probably in about 6 weeks. We'll do another event. But thanks so much for coming tonight, and thanks so much to Department of Foreign Affairs for hosting us. It's great to be back in person. All right.
Thanks, Fergal.